Yes, 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 yes. Here we are. So we're going to talk today about Saturday. Um, my dad's in recovery thingy is coming up, and the fellas are lining up. It's what an adventure it's been, and I've talked to a lot of people, and people are wondering, well, so what's it about? What are you going to do? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I don't have a real any kind of a script organized, but I'm just going to maybe ramble a little bit. You know, so this Saturday, it's not me sitting at the front of the room educating. Um, it's my goal is to help men um, realize how important they are in the lives of their kids, and no matter how old their kids are. It's funny. My dad's been passed now for I'm going to say 15 years, maybe more, more actually, and he still has an influence on my life. Um, I have pictures of him around the house, and he still has an influence in my life. It's interesting, you know, and I I don't think it ever stops. So dad is like super important. I mean, I have pictures of my mom too, but this is not about that. And so even when my dad died at 80, I think he was 80, and the I had a lot of years with him where I was supposedly an adult, and you know, um, I thought about my dad a lot. I thought, often I did things in life, and I would think, what would Dad think about this? Or, would I wanted his approval? And I think that that's there for everybody for forever, and that there's some part of us that wants Dad's approval, and so the men that are coming to this event, and that men that I hope to, be involved with over the next, 10 years. Let's say I've got 10 years to do this. I know that seems like a long timeline for a guy who lives in as much in the moment as possible, but you know, my hope is to help them, to lift them up and help them realize how important they are in dad's lives, in not in their kids' lives. It's funny. Here we are, most of us. I mean, this is for men who are in recovery, right? And dads in recovery, and when it's an accepted fact in the recovery world that when we sober up, we're not very mature, and it's we get that, and if you talk to any man, woman in recovery, when it doesn't matter if they're 25 or 35 or 45 when they sobered up, they realize it pretty quickly that they've been run around for most of their life by their emotions, and that that we're generally self-centered and selfish, and we don't know it, and we don't like to admit it, but it's really step one in any recovery program, is that we're screwed. Our thinking's a bit screwed, and in my own case, I'll just use myself as an example. um, I sobered up at 25. Now that was young, but I think emotionally I was probably about 13, right? And I already had a little girl. She was 6 months old. So here I am, emotionally about 13 or 14 years old in a 25-year-old body, and everything was about me, and how do I look, and what are they thinking about me, and what. So that's the deal, and I didn't have, you know a relationship with a higher power to speak of. I had done lots of let's make a deal prayers that when I was in trouble, but I didn't really have a relationship. I didn't understand that. And so me as a dad, all I knew is I was fucked. And I didn't know how to have a job. I didn't, I was, but so somehow though I stayed sober or didn't drink, and really threw myself into all kinds of different ways to try and grow up and try to mature and not easy because it's a it there doesn't seem to be a direct path to that, and um, in the 12-step world recommends that we build a relationship with a higher power and gives us the steps to do it. And and I was so friggin' ADD, that it was very difficult for me, very difficult. And and I wanted a relationship with a God that I could kind of control and that I could understand, and so that I wanted to understand, I guess, because I wanted to control. So here I am, myself, adolescent, with married, and crazy, and so lots of men are in similar situations. We got the women in our lives. Got um, Corey. I'm on a video, bud. Yeah, thanks. Um, it's quiet on the set. Anyway, so a lot of men are in similar situations. They're woke up one day and they weren't prepared. Really not prepared. And and uh, um, and and so lots of fellows I'm working with didn't sober up like I did really early in the game, and so there's lots of years of damage. Their kids grew up with them still drinking, and I just talked to a guy a few minutes ago. A lot of us did what I did too. I ended up with two families. I married a second gal and had a son or third child later in life, and a lot of fellas have done that. Um, I am talking to all the men that are coming, and lots of them have three or four kids, and they're often with two families, and the damage was done with the earlier family, and they'd like to heal that, and you know, and so that's it's not just newcomers that we're dealing with. It's lots of people that have been around in recovery for a long time, and that want to rebuild those relationships, um, and maybe not sure how to do it or haven't done the step work around it. And so I just pulled some of my little note cards out that, from that note order of importance of some of the stuff that I thought we'd cover on the weekend. And I might not get to some of this. I mean, one of the big things that I want to talk about on the weekend is men's relationship with the mothers of their children, and like there's a that's a big one. It's like often there's animosity there. They've burned those bridges really, really badly, and and now they're sober, and they're like, I don't know why she's still mad at me. Well, she's often still mad because we really, really screwed it up bad, and it takes time, and good living, and real direct amends to heal those things. It doesn't just happen overnight, and so we're going to talk about that, and it takes a change in thinking, you know, and but I want to hear from all the men in the group on this weekend. How is the relationship with the mother of your children or mothers of your children, and I just I know that some men are mad, and and they got off on the wrong foot. They may be sober and try to um, fight things out in the courts, and that doesn't always work. We want to bring love into the recipe, and not um, fighting it out, or anger, fear, and to see that. So that we're gonna shine the light on that subject, and I don't know exactly where it'll go, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for healing in in the relationships that we have with the moms of our kids, and I want to encourage that, and but we'll see where it goes. And anyway, a few little notes that I have. It says, if asking for help is a learned behavior, where are our kids going to learn it? So hard for us to ask for help. Really hard for us to ask for help, and maybe even even the mother of our children, she didn't know how to ask for help. If it's a learned behavior, and I suspect it is a learned behavior, so these are just questions, and there's one of the things that comes up is that there is no manual as a dad. If there was a manual, we wouldn't probably read it anyway. I mean, some people would say, well, the big book in the recovery world is a manual, and I guess it is, but deciphering it can take a long time. And but there is no. Here's what might be the most important job in our life, which is being a dad, and you know, there's we don't have a manual, and nobody to talk to. You know, we fellas, where the hell do we go to talk to men? This is what I want to create. What we're going to create is a community, so men have somewhere to go and and talk to other men about being loving, trusted fathers. And so we were just supposed to know how to be a dad, and many of us didn't have great role models, and mm, and we don't have mentors or a peer group of men who are dads. Um, so that's what we're going to create, right? No benchmark, and all the emotions, because we sobered up. Remember, we mentioned earlier that many of us were, no matter how old we were, we still had the emotional maturity of an adolescent, and it takes years. Mhm. I think now, after a lot of years of being in recovery, that I may have aged mature wise about a year for every five. And, you know, I don't, want to say that to everybody else, but, it takes a long time to grow up. And I run into guys with 8 or 10 years in recovery, and they think they got it. And I say, well, fellas, it takes a while, you know, and we're still acting out and being angry and resentful and trying to get our way and all of that stuff. And here we are, dads, and often with not a lot of principles, you know, or understanding of principles. In the 12-step world, it says principles before personalities, or that we practice these principles in all our affairs. But if you sit down with a lot of guys and they've got some recovery and say, what principles do you think they're talking about? And they don't know, and that's the stuff we want to bring into our home, is those principles. And so it's a good question. What principles are we talking about? You know, it also suggests that we have to let go of our old ideas. And our old ideas often were based in fear, selfishness. So here we are learning to be a dad in recovery. And, my goal is to help men to see themselves, um, more clearly, and to become more conscious, right? Um, no benchmark, asking for help. Kids, was it safe to ask? Okay, for a lot of kids, it wasn't safe to ask for help. Um, Connecting older kids. That this is the thing that that for me, this is just an idea. We're talking about older kids, and um, I talk to men about their kids and their older kids, and I'll say, well, do you have pictures of them? Nope, they don't. So they haven't really done a lot of effort to even keep them top of mind. So that's a suggestion. Get pictures of your older kids. If you're not seeing them, if they're estranged, somebody will have pictures. You don't have to get pictures of them when they were younger, but uh, usually, if you can find them on social media, you can find pictures of them, and and have those pictures, in your home. I had a guy. He said, "I don't want to look at pictures of my kids. It hurts too much." Well, so feel it, feel it, and remember that if we're going to rebuild, or not rebuild, but if we're going to build a relationship with our older children, if that's what we want, then we have to go through the pain. We have to face the fears, and so pictures are one thing. Now the other thing is that if you have a relationship with your older kids, and you're able to call them, be consistent. Again, these are just tips and thoughts, and be consistent. Check in with them. Ego says, "Oh, they should call me." Fuck, call them. You know, I'm very blessed that my kids do call me from time to time, but I call them a lot. You know, how you doing? My daughter lives out in Squamish, and you know, at least once a week I call her about nothing, just how you doing, and we talk, and about the kids, and she has twins that I think are 9 or 10, and they're amazing, and so we talk about the kids, or we talk about what her just stuff, and I'm really careful not to give advice. You know, nobody needs an old guy giving advice. I just listen, and tell my stories too. But but that's I'm very blessed that I do have another son that lives in Asia, and we don't talk as often, but about once every 2 weeks, we get on the phone for 40 minutes, and sometimes it ends up going to current events, but that's okay. It's great. It's beautiful, and I've my middle son, and then Luke and I talk a lot, you know, at least 3 times a week, and sometimes it's really about nothing. He calls me when he's on the road. So those things, though, I reach out to all of those guys, and I call them and talk to them. So my thought to you is, if you've got older kids and you can talk to them, do. You know, sit home uh, thinking, "Oh, my kids don't call me." Fuck. If you want a relationship, you have to reach out. That's the deal. And so recognize their life. These are some of the notes I made, you know, I I make a point of of saying nice things about them, and I have to think about that, and just I'm dad, and remember, I was saying early in this conversation that even as an adult, maybe in my 40s, and before my dad passed away, that I still wanted him to approve, of me. And my dad was never one for saying, "Hey, you did a good job." He didn't do that, and but I do that, and I think that it's good that we can do those things. So that's just some of the stuff that's going to come up. Um, okay, we really this is a fact that when I ask men, what does it mean to be dad, and it's not an easy question to answer. It's like, I don't know, and I talked to a fella today that he has a toddler, and he and his wife, of course, he's still together with the mother, and which is great, and they 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 handle things differently, you know. It's okay to, you know, to be, um, with my kids, if they kind of fell down a couple of stairs, I wouldn't be the one to run over and grab them. You know what I mean? I would be like, "Hey, you okay?" And and so dads handle things a little bit differently, I think, than mums do, and it's not, you know, um, and that's perfect. And he was talking to me today about this, that that she's on him quite a bit about how he is with their toddler, and so that's part of the deal. If you're co-parenting or you're in the house with your kids and their mom, um, you're not always going to agree on how things are supposed to be, and that's okay. That's just okay. I have I encourage men to not argue. Say you're probably right, and just let it go. There's um, we do things. Men and women will do things differently, right? Um, Discipline is one of those things that how do we discipline and work with our kids, especially if they're we have them part time, and that's a scenario for sure. And so maybe things are more disciplined at moms. That was my the case in my home when in my because a lot of times with my kids I wasn't with their moms, and I'm blessed with two ladies who are the mothers of my kids that are wonderful and still connect with me regularly, and I have no complaints about that. But I discipline differently. Things were pretty loosey goosey at my house, and more um, tight and organized, and especially with my second wife, and that's just the way it was, and uh, I was she used to get on me pretty bad because I'd let him stay up way too late. He'd be falling asleep at school, and we got through it, and nobody got hurt too bad, and it was good. So these are all things that the day to day stuff. I was talking to a fellow the other day who's, got a little girl. She's 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that, and he said things are going really well. I don't think I need your dad's in recovery thing. And I said, okay, why don't you come and bring your things are going well attitude, bring your, and I want you to be part of this, that men need each other. And uh, and the other side of that is that often we reach out for help when shit's hit the fan, right? And it doesn't have to be really bad for us to start to build relationships with men who are dads in recovery. And I said to him, geez, one day she's going to be 14 and maybe not coming home at night, or 15, or some of you will remember that we started our craziness at a pretty young age. So um, and he was like, oh, I never thought of that, so um, my feeling is that as we build this community of men, we'll be there to support each other as we go through. Where else are you going to go to be around men who have experience? And I don't know about you, but sometimes counseling isn't the deal, and or reading a book can be helpful, but maybe not as helpful as being with a group of men. So um, that's that's the deal. Okay. Um, do 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 do. One of the things that I'm going to do really early on Saturday morning is get each man to introduce himself, and it looks to me like we'll have about you know a lot of the men have 3 and 4 kids, and so I think it's quite likely that we'll have you know triple the amount of kids that we have men that we're kind of representing or that we have in our lives, and that's exciting, that this could affect. And I just talked to a fella. I've been talking to a lot of guys today. Talked to a fella a few minutes ago, and you know, he's a granddad, and there's going to be grandpas in the room, and he's got a second family with younger kids, but his older kids have kids, and it's kind of neat, you know. And dad, I was talking already earlier about how important dad is. That you know, when we speak about the patriarch, you know, in family, in community, in you know, in religion, it's often dad or father. You know, there's a reason for that. You know, it doesn't diminish mom to realize that dad is important, and so the whole world is dad's been missing a lot, and the damage that's done in homes where dad's not there, where you know I was reading some statistics that teenage pregnancies are way up. Kids at homes where their dad's not there, many of them don't finish high school. Um, you know, there's some big numbers around incarceration that with families where dad's not there. So I think this is more than just doing something to make these men feel better about themselves, although that's going to happen. There's a real need, you know, for a movement to have dads in the home and dads. If you know, in my case, um, you know, I broke up with my first wife when my kids were in their early teens, and I married again, and but everybody, you know, we kind of kept the family. It was like a new, different family, but we kind of kept the family, and you know, my first wife came to my wedding when I married my second, and a number of years later, when my first wife married, I went to their wedding, and you know, and all of our family functions would be, you know, with when I was married to my second wife, my first wife came to all the functions, and later when I wasn't married to either one of them, you know, but they would come to, you know, functions at my house, and we did stuff, and so it was just like it was family, but it didn't take the traditional form, and I don't think there's anything wrong or right about that. I just think that, you know, there was love, and so it worked, you know. Um, I guess it worked. You know, could it have been better? Sure. Yeah. Um, I wrote a whole bunch of notes, you know, about where we're going with this, and Dad wants to. Dad, I'll just read some of them, see if something comes out of this. These are like talking points, really. Dads want to know if they're doing a good job. There is no benchmark, and that's so there's this open thing that's there all the time, and I mean, a lot of men are probably really hard on themselves, but yeah, we want to know if we're doing a good job. Role model. Tell me about your dad. So this is something we may do on Saturday. Was he present? So we want to hear from the men. Was their dad present? Was he loving? Was he caring? Was he understanding? Was he active? Where was he as a dad on a scale of 1 to 10? And you know, having our motto that we don't want to be the dad our dad was isn't enough. You know, just that isn't a recipe for success. And because so many times when we think, oh, I just don't want to be like he was, that's who we become, you know. So I want to help men to have a vision of, you know, what does it look like, you know, how's the relationship with your dad. And so I'm going to ask men, and some of this is in the longer course. This is just a 1 day thing, but I have a longer course that we're going to do. How is the relationship with your dad now? So that's a big deal, you know. if you don't like your father or you're still angry at your father, I believe with all my heart that it affects the relationship with your kids. What do you think? Hey, where would your kid's mom put you as a dad on a scale of 1 to 10? That's you know, could be a revealing question if men are honest that, you know, maybe she doesn't have you very high on that list for a reason. I don't know. Maybe you need to be more active. Sometimes men have just got to find their courage to get back in, even if it's not pleasant sometimes, and if she's mad at you, and that's understandable. Often we way oversold. We told them we could do a job that we couldn't, that, but, so and we've got to buy that stuff back. Um, no time as a dad, this is just notes to myself, no time as a dad, no matter what we have done or not done, or how hard the judgment we have on ourselves is that and no matter what time or how hard the judgment we have on ourselves is, that we can't start over. I believe we can. Um, so at no time can we not start over. So that's just something that I think that all men need to realize, that they can start over. Um, we can always shift the context, you know, in the journey of being a dad. The context isn't shifts. It really has to shift from "what about me" to "how can I make a difference? How can I serve my kids? How can I serve my family?" You know, most dads have regrets about not having spent enough time with their kids. Ta-da! And we do, and we bury that shit. We got to get it out, you know. It's not from a place of, oh well, it's too bad that's what happened, but let's just get it out and look at it, and let it go, and start over. You know, weekly calls, baby. As a father, we're called into service. Service requires courage, acceptance, gratitude, and love. As a father, we're called into service. Again, these are just notes to myself. We became a dad. We were exposed to love. Well, this is a good one. Oh my God, like really exposed to love. It's like, oh my God. Have you been in the room when a baby comes into the world? Wow, it is like, you know, yeah, it can be really be touches us in such a deep place, you know, to even be in the presence of a of a newborn. It's like you can just, it's palatable, the love in the room, and that scares the hell out of men because it's out of control, baby. It's out of control, and I guess um, it's why lots of us drank when the babies came, you know, and I know certainly my father's um, world. That's they they seem to be that they celebrated with by getting drunk, and yeah, because it's hard. It's not just like, wow, I'm a dad. It's also, holy shit, this is real, and this love is real. Um, when we became a dad, we're exposed to love. That can be scary. Can cause us to doubt ourselves. Yes. Called to love as a dad. Hard call. We're often run away. Men run away because we're afraid of that. And it's very vulnerable. Scary, this love business. Cannot be controlled. Has to be surrendered to. So this is some of the stuff we're going to cover. I'm going on and on here. I don't know if anybody will ever listen to this, but it's part of where we're going with dads in recovery. And then just a question, tell me where you've done a great job as a dad. Pictures of your kids, current. When you think about your kids, is it with a positive vision or a worried one? A lot of times men have fear. And I just want to talk about fear. Fear has a tendency to create the stuff we're afraid of, right? Fear creates what we're afraid of. If you've done any recovery work in the big book on fear, it says Fear set in motion trains of circumstance we felt we didn't deserve. So it 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 does. It creates stuff. So um, if we have a lot of fear around ill health, what do we get? If we have fear about our kids not going to love us, or they're going to, become addicts and alcoholics like us, it's worthy of being aware that the statistics are high on that one. But we don't want to live in fear, because fear, everything here, everything, everything here was somebody's imagination. Everything. Look around your house. Everything came out of imagination. Somebody imagined that table. Somebody imagined that light, right? At one time, everything on the planet seems to have come out of somebody's imagination. They imagined cars and motorcycles, everything. And so um, we have to be careful about our strong thoughts of, especially if we're in self-pity, fear, and anger, and that's why we learn to deal with those things in the 12 steps, so that we can surrender them and not create that reality. I mean, that's a bit of a, actually shouldn't be that foreign. Most of you guys understand that. Pictures your kids, think about them, a worried one. Your relationship with your kids starts with you. Do you talk to your kids about God? There's another one, you know, I remember when I did an online course, led one for dads in recovery, and that was the question. And all these men were men who were in a higher power based program, and I said to them, so how do you talk to your kids about God? And they were like, talk to my kids about God. Hmm. You obviously have a relationship with a higher power. You're sober, and you know that's we've had this psychic change, and so what do you in any way introduce any concept of a higher power to your kids? And I think that's important. It doesn't have to be religion, but that there is something greater than us, and that we're in my case, that I'm in it. We're it, when Bill W. in his writing in the Big Book said that God either is or he isn't, either he's everything or he's nothing. If he's everything, then even though I can't understand it or really completely comprehend it, I'm in it. This is it. We're in the here and now, and he talks about in the Big Book. Bill talks about the fourth dimension. We were skyrocketed to the fourth dimension, and well, the fourth dimension is time, and if Bill said we were skyrocketed into the fourth dimension, it would have been into now. And that's why I'm kind of a big, I like to say be here now, because now is where it's at. There is no other time, really. And so yeah, I talk about God with my kids, and have for forever, and I can't create their relationship, and I don't want to sell them on a concept that's this is the only way, or or mythology of any kind. But I think it helps to have some symbols of that, you know, so that we can recognize that through the symbology that there is something other than us. And eventually, if one continues with the spiritual search, if you will, it'll come, you know, and it'll come through the steps as well. Not an overnight matter, though, right? It says it would continue for a lifetime, and so we're on the path, and every day becoming more aware, and also in our 12 steps it teaches us a design for living. So we learn the principles so that we can have a principle based life, as well as this relationship with our higher power. Um, Well, I think I'm getting close. I've gone on and on for almost 40 minutes. Kids need their dad. That's the bottom line. And I want to help dads, to be there and to find the courage and find the support and lift them up so that they'll, from this day forward, there'll always be, a more available, a better dad. And so that's that's the deal. Thank you for listening to this. And if you know anybody, there's still some spots for this weekend. And yeah, I think men sometimes they're afraid to look at this stuff, and that's okay. But I think that they this can open the door, to help men to be better dads and more available dads and more loving and more trusted by their kids and by the mums. Mums are important, baby. They, they're really important. No matter what they've done or haven't done, we need to love them. And yeah. So even though many dads didn't plan to be a dad, it wasn't like, oh, let's have children. For many of us, it was like, holy shit, we're having a kid, and and then we're thrown into it, in a way, unprepared. And so I want to build a support for men. I'm building a support for men, and it's a great mission. So join me on that. I need your support to get the message out, and if you feel like you want to sponsor something like this, I could use that support as well, because this is it's kind of all I'm doing, and it doesn't have a big, there's no big financial reward, but I do have bills. That's it. Love you, and um, yeah, comments, I'll certainly answer them, and your thoughts. If you do listen to this whole thing, tell me. I'd like to hear. I've never done a long, rambling 42-minute video before, so let's see what happens with it. Okay, love you guys so much. Thank you.